come. Yes, we can.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
What the f*** is wrong with you?
Well, welcome to the Really American What the Franklin special broadcast of what is going to be the final hearing today after, a year and a half coming up. What am I coming up on 2 years since the January 6, 2020 insurrection? We find ourselves now with what looks like it's going to be a recommendation, a strong statement. It will be that the president has violated multiple criminal laws and he should be treated, well, they're not going to actually say that, but they will recommend a justice. At least that's what everybody expects, that this former president should face the music. Joining us right now, White House correspondent Brian Karem, and author of Free the Press, which is in its fourth printing and kicking ass. Good to have you here, buddy.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and also nice to join us, former prosecutor, now criminal defense attorney Duncan Levin. Duncan, hi.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody. This is obviously, it's the wound is not as fresh as it was almost 2 years ago. But when we go back and examine this, it still does feel like a tremendous violation. I just want to play something for you here. This happened right after the January 6th attack, and this is Todd Young, who is a representative from Indiana, who was still a Trump supporter. Listen up.
You're supposed to represent our opinion.
Actually, I'm very glad you said that. My opinion doesn't matter. And you know what? When it comes to the law, our opinions don't matter. The law matters. Opinions don't matter. The law matters. I value your opinion. I actually share your concerns. I share your conviction that President Trump should remain president. I share that conviction.
The law matters with us.
I share that conviction. But the law matters.
It doesn't matter what the
I
Democrats.
took an oath under God. Under God. Okay. I took an oath. Do we still take that seriously in this country?
I do. I do. Sir, will you be
Wow. Yeah, that actually happened on January 6th. I have another cut of him a little bit later on, not backing down on that. Obviously, we expect today a recommendation to justice. Duncan, what does that mean when the House, this January 6th committee, which is Democrats and Republicans, prominent Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, what does it mean when they recommend to justice that we pursue a criminal case against the former president?
I mean, legally speaking, it means nothing. But, it's a recommendation. It carries enormous weight symbolically that the legislative branch would be making this referral over to the executive branch. But it's hardly news to anyone at the Department of Justice what happened at January 6th. There's been a slew of prosecutions into January 6th defendants. Frankly, I have one of them. The cases have been intensely reviewed at all levels of the senior part of the department. This is nothing that's new to them. So what is new? Basically that this is now going, the pressure is building on them to do something about it from the legislative branch. So it's a very consequential referral from history's perspective and from the perspective of the pulpit that the legislative branch has. But legally speaking, it really doesn't mean much of anything.
Politically, Brian, there's a lot of people that don't believe justice should indict a former president of the United States, especially since it seems like he's beginning to, with the NFT is a great example. He's beginning to really implode.
Beginning?
Well, no, you know what I mean. I mean, like the support that he had, like that you saw Todd Young there. Those people are quiet now. At least most of them. You still get the occasional Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, but for the most part, it seems to me that there is some discretion, and Garland has some discretion here. And should he exercise that?
I think he's going to be indicted. I think he's going to be convicted. I don't think he'll ever spend a day behind prison bars, but he may be confined to Mar-a-Lago with an ankle bracelet on. But that's all amount that we have to wait and see. But I do believe, justice will take the turn that justice takes. So I do think, from my sources in the DOJ, that he will be indicted. Now, what happens after that is anyone's guess. But I don't
indicted on the Mar-a-Lago or January 6th.
Oh, multiple charges. I think Mar-a-Lago, Georgia, January 6th. I think all of them have potential for indictment, and I don't think he's going to escape one or multiple indictments. But to Duncan's point about not the referral not meaning anything, what it means is politically it's something, and it's historically something. He's absolutely right. Doesn't matter. The DOJ's been working hand in hand with the January 6th committee since the January 6th committee started. So there's really, there's no surprise, there's no news. DOJ is well ahead of.
Well, let me interrupt you there, Brian, because at one point Garland said he would like to get more information from the committee. So we say hand in hand. There's a delay, obviously, from when they have.
I don't know specifically what he was talking about. I know that there were representatives of the DOJ who were working with members of the January 6th committee. That I know for a fact. I don't know what he was referencing when he said that. Honestly, I'd forgotten that he had said that. But nonetheless, those people, there's no big surprises there. Maybe what he wants to get is more direct information and put some people back on the stand. But so it doesn't. They don't need a referral. The point is, they don't need a referral to proceed and charge. What they do, what the referral does, is give an impetus to it. It's a historic moment. That was an insurrection. These people are traitors to the American Republic, traitors to the Constitution, and having members of Congress sign off and saying we recognize it and we refer charges to the DOJ is something for the history books. And it's something to it's a crossing the T and dotting the I. But he's right, Duncan. You know that it's not necessary for the DOJ. If they want to prefer charges, they don't need Congress to tell them. They've got more power in subpoena than Congress does, and they can certainly get more information than Congress.
I want to remind everybody watching, we're going to carry this right up until the coverage starts, and you can watch the coverage right here on the Really American Network. This is Chip Franklin and What the Franklin with Duncan Levin and Brian Karem. Duncan, as a prosecutor.
A tie, by the way. You should have told me, Chip. I would have worn a tie for you.
Yeah, you don't wear a tie. They'll when they're burying you, you'll still have a turtleneck on or something. Duncan, so if you had to pick Cy Vance's old New York case, which fell apart when he left, but Georgia, the documents, or the insurrection, which one, as a prosecutor, that you want to win, which one would you pick as the one you think has the best chance of going?
Well, let me just, by way of a little background, because your viewers may not know this, but I am also counsel to Jennifer Weisselberg, who is Alan Weisselberg's ex-daughter-in-law, and that entire fringe benefits case came from us, from Jen Weisselberg's mouth. We were working with prosecutors for a long time leading up.
Explain a little bit to our audience, a little bit of the history on that, if you would, please.
Sure. So Jen Weisselberg is married to Barry Weisselberg, who is the son of Alan Weisselberg. Alan Weisselberg was convicted and basically was not a cooperator, but an important witness against the Trump organization in the recent state court action that the Manhattan DA's office brought against Weisselberg and the Trump organization. The core of that case was about whether the Trump organization violated state tax laws by paying for fringe benefits and not actually properly the recipients of it, and the Trump organization were in a conspiracy not to properly account for those fringe benefits. It was things like her children's education or at school or rental on an apartment. That was the core of the criminal case. And Jen Weisselberg met with prosecutors for months on end, years, frankly, giving them voluminous boxes of documents, and was very helpful in that case. So I'm very well aware of what's going on with that case. And my understanding, based on the public statements that the DA has made, is that that is very much continuing. And despite some reports to the contrary, it's under investigation. And there may very well be more charges against either former President Trump or the Trump organization stemming from all of that. So that's one case. But these other, look, I think nobody knows what's going to happen to former President Trump in any of these cases specifically. But I think if you're battling multiple, places that are trying to indict you, and if you have to actually ask which state is going to indict you first, I think you have a number of legal problems you're going to have to get to the bottom of.
I think the most serious of all these has to be January 6th, obviously, right? I mean, there was a former president, well, a current president at the time, calling for people to walk on the Capitol from Casey Hutchinson. Was that her name? What am I?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if I
according
could
to her,
there are a lot of different types of people that were there that day. And I've now been studying thousands of hours of videotape associated with this. And I think that a lot of people are getting lumped in together. And when it comes to criminal cases that are going to result in people's incarceration, and let's remember that the last, say, 11 cases or so have resulted in massive jail terms for everybody there. I think the judges have been handing out, approximately 7, 8, 9, 10 years in prison for what people were involved in. There are different levels of culpability here, and you do have to break it down a little bit. I mean, there were the Oath Keepers who may have allegedly breached the front line, talked to each other, coordinated, et cetera, et cetera. There were also a lot of people who were there that day on the Capitol grounds who were trespassing, and they were engaged in federal misdemeanors, some of whom wound up inside the Capitol building at a point where they weren't in the front, they were towards the back. And we can all argue for sure over whether they were culpable and what level of culpability and what, but I do think it's a little important to note, just not that I'm defending President Trump's actions in any way that day, except to say he wasn't there. He wasn't inside the Capitol. He's a very different case than the rest of the defendants who are either being indicted for going into the Capitol or for stealing things for the Capitol or for engaging in altercations with police officers. That's what these criminal cases have looked like. And so I think in a way he might be the only person who we're discussing in this context who wasn't physically there that day. And so the theory of a criminal charge is going to have to look a little bit different as it relates to him, if that's something that they go forward with.
Well,
how different would it be if he had gone up to the Capitol in that limousine, like he said? How does the whole case in your mind change then, right?
Right. I mean, and again, we could twist any number of hypotheticals here.
Fair enough.
There are a lot of people opining about criminal charges for him based on this, and I do think it would be. I haven't specifically studied it with regard to him, but he wasn't there. The question is whether he incited a crowd, which you can do from afar, or whether he was in some sort of conspiracy with those who were organizing it that day. I just haven't seen that yet myself. It may be there. It may be that the January 6th committee has it. Maybe the DOJ has it. But these are just the kind of details that what I'd like to see before knowing which, what the prospective, charges would be or when they're coming.
Well, I was there, and Rudy Giuliani specifically encouraged. I think he's got to worry about the incitement charges or obstruction charges for what he did. Rudy Giuliani said trial by combat, encouraged, and so did Donald Trump's two sons, and Donald Trump encouraged it. And Donald Trump had the opportunity on several occasions. I was at the White House that day to come out and say something to stop the people. We begged him to do it. Judd Deere, we went to Judd Deere. I said, look, there's 100 feet between his office and the Brady briefing room. Send him out to do something. He needs to do it. And Judd said, Brian, I know he needs to do it, and he won't. So Donald Trump knew well what was going on. Whether or not you can prove criminal culpability is the only test I believe the DOJ is. I don't think anybody doubts that all of this benefited one man. All of this was driven by one man. Whether or not he's the successful mob boss who can evade culpability by sending his minions via hypotheticals, subterfuge, or metaphor, fine. But I don't think there's any question that who it benefited and why. And what we heard from everyone that was marching up there was that they were going because the president had told them to. That hasn't changed. I think for the DOJ and for prosecutors, it's whether or not, and I think that's something that people have to understand that they really don't, is there may be no doubt that the mob boss was behind the killing, but being able to prove the link in court is the part that you have a problem with. And I think I think the DOJ is that's why it's taken a while. I get a little upset with people who say, Merrick Garland is taking a sweet time and doesn't want to prosecute. I've interviewed, I know Merrick Garland. I don't find that to be true at all. I think it's far easier to commit a crime than it is to prove who committed it and how. It's much harder to prosecute someone for that crime. And if you're going to take a shot at Donald Trump, you'd better not miss. So I think they're being careful, cautious for a reason. And I do suspect that there will be indictments coming, whether or not, Chip, or that it has anything to do with January 6th. That's, that would be the ultimate. But I think there are other avenues, and I think Georgia is one of them. And I think the Mar-a-Lago thing is one of them. But as Duncan said, that it's really, proving that Donald Trump, we all know, but proving it is going to be the tough nut to crack.
And don't we have a case in DC in the last 50 years where I believe a Ku Klux Klan member called for people to charge the Capitol, and he was not cited for insurrection because the words weren't actually there. Trump did say, "Let's go to the Capitol." There are numerous people that know that he knows that the people were armed, that witnessed him being told that people were armed. If you put that in front of a jury, you might have, again, that would be a tough jury too, because all you need is one person that supported the president or doesn't want to see the president convicted or sentenced or put into a prison. But I remember Gerald Ford's pardon and the theory behind that. This ain't that, though. This is not covering up a burglary of a Democratic headquarters for some papers that had very little relevance to a guy who won, 49 states in that election. This is much different. And I understand as a prosecutor, you have a difficult task, and it's supposed to be that way. But I do look at this January 6th date, and I have to ask myself, when you interview 24 people who ran into the Capitol that day, and everyone to a person says they were guided and they believe they were told to do it by this president. There's a preponderance of evidence to show that he wanted this to happen. He's a mob guy, though. Michael Cohen will tell you, he knows. He says, hey, get the thing done that we were talking about. I want that thing done. As a prosecutor, you can say, this means if I'm a defense attorney, I say, you don't know what he was saying. You don't know what he was referring to. Is that where we are with this?
With Donald Trump, you could say he may not even know what he was referring to. He's not.
But Duncan, so I go back to my other question. Would you rather be prosecuting the case where he says, can you get me 11,000 votes? Or would you rather have this, where he stood in front of the world and said, let's go to the Capitol, and that, you have to fight for what you want. And Giuliani saying, trial by combat. These were all people put on stage by this president.
I don't really envy the task, frankly, of any of these prosecutors, because one thing is for sure, 99% of criminal cases plead out in this country. Maybe the figure is 95%, but whatever the figure is, a vast majority of criminal cases plead out. I think we are all pretty safe to prognosticate that if there are criminal charges personally against Donald Trump, that this is a case that is going to go to trial, that this is going to be something that is going to be probably the quintessential circus. And I think that whatever case they bring is going to have to be a very strong one. We know it's going to have to be a strong case. And we know it's going to have to be a serious case. And so I do think there is something to the fact that these things may fall like dominoes. Once one comes, it does sort of open up the Rubicon, so to speak. But I think the Mar-a-Lago one is probably the most immediately damaging one, because those were very sensitive files that were alleged to have gone missing. And if there is an obstruction in there, you could say on the one hand, so what? Some government files, were taken home. People leave offices every day of the week and take documents home with them. So what? But these were very special documents. They were very easily accessible to people, and some of them are missing. And so, I think if there was any kind of obstruction of that investigation, that is probably the easiest low-hanging fruit. It's frankly not even really a financial investigation. It's pretty straight up obstruction case. And so to me, that kind of thing is easier to digest and probably more straightforward. But I honestly think the prosecutors in all these cases have a pretty, they have a tough time ahead of them to actually get something to the finish line.
To Duncan's point, in Mar-a-Lago, in that case specifically, they tried to work with Donald Trump. Look, we know you got some stuff, and Donald Trump's people got back to him and said, "Yeah, we'll search for it, we'll go for it, we'll get it back to you." The turning point was on June 1st when Donald Trump's lawyer sent a letter to the DOJ saying, "We got nothing else. We got nothing." And then somebody said, "Well, they're lying to you." And at that point in time, they had to execute a warrant because it wasn't only the fact that those documents, whatever they were, belong to the government, right, to the National Archives. It is also the fact that they had suspicions that there were very sensitive documents and that he might be using them to his benefit. So that was because you'd never know what Donald Trump's going to do with anything that he has. And I'll guarantee you, if Donald Trump could make money off of getting indicted, if he could run a bingo game on that, he'd do it. There's nothing that this guy won't do to grift to make money. So at that point in time, the DOJ had to execute a search warrant to get the information back. It was there after he said it wasn't. That is the point where they began looking at it for obstruction because he lied. His lawyer lied for him and said, "We got nothing." And they're still finding documents that are sensitive and belong to the U.S. government, and he still continues to lie. At first, he said it was a put-up job by the FBI. He said there were no documents there. And then he said, "You know what? They were there, and I'm entitled to all of them. They're mine. In fact, there's nothing that isn't mine." That statement he made on Fox, I believe, which shows intent, which shows the fact that he doesn't care about the law. He only cares about himself. You're right. That's the easiest one to prosecute him on at this point in time. But the more interesting one that I think will fall secondly, I do believe that they'll indict him federally first. But I think the Georgia case is also going to be indictable. And then the last one that would fall as dominoes go would be January 6th.
Duncan, let me ask you this question. So if there isn't an indictment, and I'm sure many times prosecutors choose not to do this for reasons that are many and complex. In this particular case, more so to that point. I mean, what will the indictment and imprisonment of a former president say? Will it create a further chasm and polarization of politics in this country that will last 50 years? You said every day that many of these cases are settled. Can you foresee Trump's lawyers settling a case like this, or Trump agreeing to something like this that doesn't involve prison time and he walks away but never can run for office again, or something like that?
It's a great question because it's been a question I ask myself all the time, which is, okay, you go through all of this effort and assuming that he's not going to wind up, if he were indicted on some crime, that he's not going to wind up in prison. So assuming that for the sake of this argument, you say, well, what have you accomplished by going through this whole process? Well, a lot, actually. I mean, a lot of this, as we started this conversation, is historic and symbolic. And the way, for example, the Congress would refer something to DOJ. These are all unprecedented things. But again, this is a president who was impeached twice. And then there's talk about him being the front runner for the nomination. I mean, I guess the conversation changes, but people think precedent. People say for years, well, for example, a felony charge will ruin a corporation. If you're a corporation, you have a felony charge, it'll ruin you. But, the New York County DA's office, which is the same office that had the Trump organization case and just got that convicted, also brought charges with the federal government against HSBC Bank. And HSBC, this is several years ago, took a felony conviction for some wire stripping in association with a sanctions case, and they're doing just fine. In fact, I think their stock price rose. So right immediately thereafter. So this conventional wisdom, a conviction means X, Y, and Z. Look, the fact is, if he were a lawyer, he'd get disbarred. If he worked for a company, he'd get fired. If there are all sorts of horrible consequences of getting a felony conviction in this country. People lose student loans, they get deported. There are all these collateral consequences. The question for Donald Trump is, should he be indicted and or convicted of a crime? Obviously, jail time is a punishment, but other than that, would he even face any collateral consequences anyway? I mean, arguably not. Everyone knows
Those
what
NFT cards.
I mean, yeah.
He's going to make money off of it. I'm telling you, he'll grift that right into the grave. Twice convicted. Get your new card. I'm here, superhero Trump.
Duncan, obviously, for those of us, I've been on the air covering him since, goes back almost to the late 80s, early 90s. But the last 6 years, there have been so many things. And Brian, of course, is and people like, I've had many people on here that have written books about it, from Carol Leonnig to Mr. Karem. But the question is, are there consequences to this that we just will never know? I mean, we know that he got a lot of money from Russian oligarchs. We know about Manafort in 2016 and the relationship with Ukraine and Zelensky. And now moving forward, my thought is that again, these NFTs were essentially geared so he would, if you did the math on that, you could only buy enough that the purchase would be under $10,000 by $100. I mean, everything about it smelled like a fraud. It smelled like a guy that's just trying to bring money together, either for a defense or for an escape. But I guess my point is that, in most of the real crimes, they tell people to follow the money. In this particular case, we all know about the money. I mean, the money's out there. We know about, Jared's $2 billion deal, about the arms deal he cut when he was in the White House and didn't even have a security clearance. We know Eric Trump has said we've always got our money from Russia. We know about the Saudis bought the 45th floor of Trump Tower. I mean, you just go down this list, and it seems to me that that's what gets me about Cy Vance and New York, because it seems like Letitia James and Vance had a great case, a civil case against this guy that was just, from everything I read, and it went away. And I just wonder if, in fact, and this is kind of repeating this question, if we have the stones to move forward and go all the way with this. I think the committees, again, if people are just joining us, we're walking right up until 1 o'clock Eastern time to the beginning of this hearing. And I just, I know that there's a lot of angry people in Washington at what's happened, and I grew up in DC on the Capitol. I've been there, was there my whole life, and it's all changed now. The angst, the anger, the polarization, and it all points to one guy. He may be a tumor. There may be a cancer that's been there all along, but nonetheless, people are going to want something done. And I guess my last question to you is, how does the Justice Department deal with that balance, that pressure of people that need justice against, their understanding of what could happen if they proceed?
I think you have the right person in this job at the moment to do exactly that. I mean, Merrick Garland is, if anything, he's measured. He's, no one can say he's, using this in the press or that he's playing politics. I mean, he is as measured a person as I think any of us have ever seen in the position of Attorney General. And so I believe what we need, and and I'll say the same about Jack Smith, by the way, who I've known for a long time. We were both at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I watched him when he was a prosecutor, as a young prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York. He is a very, very smart, savvy lawyer who is going to do a good job in that role. And the two of them, whoever the decision makers are on this, are very even-keeled, smart people. And so they're doing what you would want them to do, which is to apply the law without fear or favor, and to apply the principle that no one is above the law. And I think they're taking a renewed look at it when, there's a lot of conversation of whether you can indict a sitting president. And that's fine. And I think the Constitution deserves that conversation. But at this point, Trump is not the president. He's a former president, and he's not afforded any, special legal consideration that anyone else is. And if you've looked, frankly, at all of the court rulings on that issue, they've all gone against him. The issue of releasing his tax returns, his Supreme Court battle over, the having Judge Deary come on as a special monitor, all these things have gone against him, and so he keeps losing in court.
Because he appointed
inquiry.
To your point, Duncan, it's in many cases, especially in the Supreme Court, he appointed these judges thinking that they owed him, and they have proved that in fact they are independent. And so those who are upset with the Supreme Court and with federal appointees, I get it. In Dobbs, horrible decision, but that was more of their own political stance and not Trump's. When it comes down to Donald Trump, they are giving him no quarter. And so Donald Trump, in appointing these people, thinking that by kowtowing to the far right and to those religious fanatics that he kowtowed to, that they would some way back him up. It's backfiring on him. It's hurt that his judicial appointments have not only hurt the United States, but more importantly, and probably more pointedly, have hurt him.
Duncan, before I let you go, I got to ask a prediction. We're looking 2 years from now. Where will Donald Trump be in the state of public awareness? And I mean, not physically. I mean, will the DeSantis, the Republican Party, have moved past him? I know that's a political question, but I guess it comes out of what we hear from the committee today and Merrick Garland. Will we still be neck deep in this in 2 years, do you think?
He has decades of legal problems ahead of him, no matter what happens. He's taking incoming fire from so many different places, from state courts and federal courts and prosecutors and civil litigants. He is just neck deep in it. And frankly, it's a personality type of people who can just put up with the background noise of all of this litigation and all these threats. And it's a lot more than most people would be able to do in a day. And so he's going to be neck deep in this. And if I have to make a prediction, I would say 2 years from now and 5 years from now, and maybe even 10 years from now, there will be a number of actions against him that we'll be dissecting, because it's not going to stop. This is I'm not going to stop.
I'm not going to stop drinking if that's true. Then I was thinking about that, but I think I'll just keep doing this. Duncan, thank you so much. Last minute for coming on and joining us. Very much appreciated. You be well. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Take care, guy. Again, Duncan Levin, nice enough to join us. Celebrated attorney who took the time to be with us here on short notice. We're walking this up to the top of the hour. I'm excited. I'm excited about the top of the hour, Brian. I'm not sure if I can make this work so people can watch it on here. So, I mean, we'll see. Normally, Brooklyn Dad does this, and he kind of gave me the last-minute instructions, but we'll have to wait and see. So this is What the Franklin. This is my show. I'm going to start doing the show under the banner of the Really American Broadcast, which is a media division that comes out of that super PAC that does such good work. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, how instrumental Really American was in getting Ossoff and Warner elected in 2018 or 2020. I'm getting them mixed up. Yeah, 2018, right? Or 2020. When in 2020. Yeah, Ossoff and Warnock, right? In 2020. Yeah, okay. I got a little backwards. All right. So obviously, it's a convoluted story here. I mean, we know that that when the president stood in front of those people down in was that Lafayette Park? Well, that was yeah. And no, that was the Bible. No, the ellipse. Yeah, I got it mixed up. Yeah, it's funny too, because people don't understand just how close the Washington Monument is to the Capitol, right there. I mean, it's and it's in fact there was a time where a guy took a huge paneled van, and drove it right up next to the Washington Monument and said it was full of explosives, and they had to empty the White House. I mean, that's how close they are to each other. He was threatening to blow up the Washington Monument. Although
you can see it from this, you go on the south lawn, it's easily, you can see it just a couple of football fields away. Anything that would be large enough to destroy the Washington Monument could definitely wreak havoc with the White House. But we have evacuated the White House on a couple of occasions because of threats at post 9/11, and that's why they closed off. They closed off Pennsylvania Avenue because of what Oklahoma City bombing, and so
right. People don't have any idea that when I was a kid and I had a job, I got to work on Capitol Hill when I was 16, and you could walk down I could walk down to Ted Kennedy's office. I could walk into his office, and there's a reception room, and you could sit in a chair and they'd say, "Can I help you?" I mean, I'd be 35 feet away from Ted Kennedy. I remember this because as a kid, the Kennedys, as a Catholic kid growing up, the Kennedys were like Camelot. They were as advertised. And so we could walk down there and do that. Now, of course, all that's changed. If I could tell the story real quick, I was on the air in Washington, D.C. I want to say it was in 98. It was before the impeachment stuff. Remember when the Capitol Hill policeman with John Gibson was killed? And it was right outside Tom DeLay's office, right? And so I'd been on the radio for 4 or 5 years, but I was still trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. And I'm in the nation's capital. I got this show in the number 8 market, and so we're kind of. I had somebody come in and explain to me the shooting, and Tom DeLay is driving home, and he hears us, and he calls in and starts to bawl on the radio because John Gibson saved his life. I mean, so you had this sense of I can't really describe it. All I can think of is Tom Daschle and George Bush hugging in 9/11 at the joint session of Congress after the attack. There was that was only 21 years ago. It's the political world is unrecognizable now.
Well, when I first walked into the White House, you could drive down Pennsylvania Avenue, turn into the North Lawn, drop your equipment off, and then park in the parking lot next door at the EEOB. And today it's just completely different.
So to that point, as much as I would love to see the son of a bitch go to jail, right? I part of me says it's almost better to ignore him. And because you now say there's no chance that he can be elected president.
I'll say it this way. He won't be on the ballot come November 2024. I don't think that's a possibility. Just look at the actuary tables. He's not a young man. He doesn't eat right. He doesn't exercise. He's got a spray on tan. I don't care what Ronnie Jackson said in the briefing room, and I was there when he said it. He could live to be 200. BS. That guy is a coronary.
He's a walking heart attack.
Or a stroke. But the actuary tables are against him. The Democrats are against him. The Republicans are against him. And his own people have begun to play. And look, the NFT thing is just the latest. I wouldn't be surprised if we had a Trump cryptocurrency at some point in time. Donald Trump is going to grift because that's what Donald Trump does. And you can't ignore him because he's on the ballot. He has declared that he's a candidate for office, and therefore you do have to pay some attention to him. And all of those who say we should just ignore him in the media, and I get that a lot, just ignore him, he'll go away. Well, no, because his people will still be there, and you need to know what this guy's doing. It's the glorification of him that needs to stop. It's the press is leaning on him for a comment at every available event, and him calling in and making himself available, and we just give him the airtime and let him suck the oxygen out of the room. Treat him as any other news source. Do not treat him as a superstar or a celebrity or even as an ex-president, because he's a con artist. And if you don't see that, then you're his mark.
Well, that's the old saying. If you don't see the con, then you're the mark.
Yeah. And that's Donald.
Yeah. And these NFTs, it's for the people who missed what I was saying earlier, they're $99. Okay. But they limit your purchase of the up to $9,900. So $9,900. Now, the reason that's important is because the IRS has a deal that when somebody, again, the money goes through a banking institution. When $10,000 comes in, it triggers an IRS look. Okay. So this money is coming through at $9,900. And so, over and over again, this is now it's a money laundering scheme is what it is. So people can give him money.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, I know, but I just want, we all laughed at it at first. And my first thought was, wait, this is not what it seems to be. That was my gut. I didn't really understand it until my good tax attorney friend, Steve Moskowitz, who sponsors these programs, pointed it out to me that this was right underneath the cap. And that's exactly, I guess there's a sense of irony here is that everybody that needs to know knows exactly what he was doing because of what he did. But again, How many times does this happen, Brian, where this guy breaks the law in front of the world and nothing happens?
Well, but again, I do have ultimate faith in Merrick Garland. I do have the faith in the justice system, and if nothing else, I'll quote my John Lennon: "Instant karma is going to get you."
Yeah.
I think the karma will get him. I don't think that Donald Trump is long for the political world, and I think he does have a world of, for the rest of his life, he's going to be running from the law, and that fat SOB can only run so fast. And the Justice Department is longer in stride than he. So I have the ultimate faith that eventually Donald Trump will face, whether it's while he's alive or after he's gone.
So let's run down who's going to be running against him in the primaries. DeSantis, obviously. Ted Cruz.
We don't know that for sure. No one else has really declared.
Wait, back up. We know DeSantis. He hasn't declared. But you don't think he'll run in the primary?
I don't know that for a fact yet. I do know his people have said that.
I didn't say no.
Yeah, I don't know, and I honestly don't. I don't know enough to venture an opinion. Nothing has convinced me yet that he's a shoo-in to run. Although he is the logical one to assume that he could assemble the very same people that Donald Trump has circling him. He could take advantage of that base. But the question is, and I've seen rumblings, that's why Kevin McCarthy isn't even a shoo-in yet for speaker.
Speaker, yeah.
You have to wait and see. It's the far right. There's like 10 people centering around Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're going to keep him from going in. You could actually see the one that could get 218 close is Donald Trump, although he would never be the Speaker of the House because he wouldn't actually want a job.
Right.
But the GOP is in such flux right now.
Wait, back up a second. He wouldn't get 130 votes.
Who?
Trump. If they nominate him for Speaker. For those who don't know what we're talking about, the Speaker of the House doesn't have to be an elected member of Congress.
No,
they can pick anybody they want to be Speaker.
Right.
And there was talk about nominating Trump. I don't think anybody wants to get near that in the House, especially where you're up for elections in 2 years. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But let me go back to this. The reason I wanted to bring it up, and by the way, if you just joined us, we're waiting for the committee to kick in, which should be in about 15 minutes. They should start coming in, and we should start getting a feed here soon. But anyway, the January 6th panel will unveil criminal referrals against Trump. As Duncan Levin, our attorney friend earlier said, that means nothing, but it is. And I bring it up because there's not a lot of people I can see on a dais at a debate that could really put Trump down the way Liz Cheney could. And I do believe that Liz Cheney has that opportunity now to move forward with this. Now, granted, she's not going to win states in the Bible Belt. She's not going to. But I do think that she will when Republicans start to see the numbers, polling numbers on Trump, and they realize they have a chance to put somebody in the White House. The only person I think right now that the Republicans could put in the White House is Liz Cheney.
Oh, I have said that repeatedly, but the Republicans are not bright enough to figure that out. That the simple fact of the matter is Liz Cheney and
they have a year and a half.
Yeah. Liz Cheney voted with Trump 93% of the time. So she's not a progressive. She's not a moderate. She is very conservative, but she did stand up to Donald Trump, and that has appeal across both aisles. And so therefore,
how many states have open primaries? Do you know?
I think it's 17, but I don't know for sure.
All right. So,
but nonetheless, her and Adam Kinzinger on a ticket, with her at the top of the ticket,
right,
could not easily, but could win the Republican, not only win for the Republicans, but think of it this way, Chip. The Republicans could then politically stick it in the Democrats' ear and saying, look, you say you're for women. Well, we put the first woman in the White House. It would be a complete about face for the Republican Party.
And it would be the smartest woman they ever put forward. Elizabeth Dole, love her. She's a good person, not a good candidate. And they were talking about her, Bob Dole's wife, who, when she ran the Red Cross, had some problems in the HIV, and that kind of derailed her. But you look at women that they have talked about nominating, Phyllis Schlafly kind of stuff. she can go out.
She could win a national election. She couldn't win a Republican primary. That's the problem with Liz Cheney. Because of the way the Republican Party is set up, she's considered a traitor to the party. She's considered a left-wing Democrat when she's none of that. And she would have a very difficult time getting out of any primaries and winning, whereas Ted Cruz and DeSantis and a host of others, and I mean, we could go on and on about who those are. They're Pompeo and et cetera and so on. The traditional white male would have a much better chance in the Republican Party because of how the Republican Party sets up their primaries and how they conduct business. But you are absolutely right. One of the things the Democrats would not want to see in 2024, I guarantee you, they do not want to see a ticket with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on it, with her at the top of the ticket. That would scare the living crap out of them.
And you know what the thing is that the thing that Cheney would do, it's like, since Roe is pretty much done, it's going to have to either go back through the courts. I'm not a believer that we can pass laws, federal laws. Again, the Supreme Court has already said the states have the right to do this. So it's a congressional law is going to go right back up through the courts and get kicked down again. And this is going to be the way it is, and everybody should get. Well,
to your point, right now you should be looking at the Respect for Marriage Act, which is going to be undermined and ruined. It was a victory for it was one of the largest celebrations I've ever seen anywhere at the White House at any point in time in my career. It was one of the coolest and without a doubt one of the easiest days I ever spent at the White House. The music was great. The spontaneous dancing was great. Man, I'm telling you, it was a good party at the White House on the South Lawn. But what people missed in that celebration was the fact that the Respect for Marriage Act, while making sure that all the states respect your wedding vows, no matter where you go, or it specifically excluded faith-based organizations from having to perform those rites. So you still may have to travel out of state in order to get yourself married, but once you come back, then it'll have to be respected. And by the way, the very guy that this was for, the 2015, I always mispronounce his name, Obergefellner, who sued the Supreme Court and won. Him and his fiance had to move to Maryland and then take their vows there, and Ohio didn't respect them. They sued, it went to the Supreme Court, and they won. He wasn't there at the White House for this celebration, and others have said that this specific celebration was a little early because the Supreme Court's going to overturn Obergefellner, and then the states are going to create more repressive laws, and that's going to tear it apart.
To that point, which I find fascinating, the attorney on behalf of the plaintiff in the right to get married case was also the attorney that represented Bush in 2000 and in the election in Florida. So that was the old world, right? And we're not in that world anymore. I know you got to run, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to do this. So I'll catch up with you either tomorrow or later in the week.
If I can get back here later, I will.
All right, pal. Be well. Again, Brian Karem. His book is Free the Press. Amazing read. It might scare you, but it's good stuff. See you, pal.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Later.
All right. Again, so we're waiting. As you can see here, we are a few minutes away. They're beginning to file in. And when this thing kicks off, please stay with us and we'll have it for you here. Great comments today, and I really do appreciate what you guys all have to say. Let's do this. So let's get a little encapsulation, though, of what's led us to this point. Let's look at some of the highlights leading up to these January 6 hearings, and this being the final one, where a recommendation for an indictment of the criminal indictment of the president is expected to come from this committee.
When you look back at what has come out through this committee's work, the most striking fact is that all this evidence come almost entirely from Republicans.
The Select Committee got this pre-prepared statement from the National Archives. As you can see, the draft statement, which was sent on October 31st, declares, "We had an election today, and I won."
Let's just hope we're celebrating. I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. But when that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. You. Sorry, over. We won. Yeah. You're wrong. You.
ABC. I said voting. Let's get right to the violence. That's what I'm.
On December 31st, agents circulated intelligence reports that President Trump's supporters have proposed a movement to occupy Capitol Hill. In particular, they flagged spikes in violent hashtags like "We Are the Storm," 1776 Rebel, and Occupy Capitals. On January 5th, a Secret Service open source unit flagged a social media account on the Donald.win that threatened to bring a sniper rifle to a rally on January 6th.
Senator Schumer is at a secure location, and they're locked down in the Senate.
There has to be some way we can maintain the sense that people have that there's some security or some confidence that government can function and that we can elect the President of the United States. The concern we have about personal harm, personal safety it just transcends everything. But the fact is, on any given day, they're breaking the law in many different ways. And quite frankly, much of it at the instigation of the President of the United States.
I'm at the Capitol building. I'm literally standing with the Chief of Police of the U.S. Capitol Police. He just informed me what you will hear through official channels. Paul Irving, your Sergeant at Arms, will inform you that their best information is that they believe that the House and the Senate will be able to reconvene in roughly an hour.
So this afternoon, I am offering this resolution that the committee direct the chairman to issue a subpoena for relevant documents and testimony under oath from Donald John Trump.
Those in favor will say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed is no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Well, so obviously the last year and a half, it's 2 years now almost. We're a month away. So 3 years, excuse me. No, 2 years. It just seems like 3 years. This is a momentous day, and I think that I come back to the real dichotomy. I look at law enforcement, which for the longest time kind of was in the Republican camp. And I think about those Gold Star mothers, who lost Sicknick's parents when they had a chance to walk by McConnell and McCarthy, did this. I love that so much, to see them walk by and refuse to shake his hand. That's our world. That's what we're going to be dealing with moving forward. Again, I think the comments from Duncan Levin, the former prosecutor, now criminal defense attorney we had on earlier in the show, who said that in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, Trump is still going to be facing the consequences, legal and civil consequences from this. And at that point, obviously, we are going to have to deal with the tremendous polar. I guess, I don't know. I mean, keep saying polarization, but we have people calling civil war. Part of me, and you can disagree, but part of me says I would just as soon we lay it all on the table and say, this is what we can do to this son of a bitch, and we don't do it, and we just show the world that. I don't know. I do think that DeSantis will run. I think that Ted Cruz and Mike Pence are considering a run. I don't know who else I can look in that group in there. I don't see any former moderates. I think Liz Cheney would be elected in a heartbeat if the Republicans could pull their heads out of their collective, butts and see this through. But I don't think they're really ready to do that. As you see right now, with about 10 minutes away from the committee actually beginning to meet, we're still waiting on that. Joining me right now is Nikki Maduro, whose show kicks off at noon today. The hearings probably be winding down, I would assume, around the time you go on the air here on the Pacific time, right, Nick?
Right, something like that. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be very. I was listening to you with Brian Karem, and the point of these hearings is to get things on the record. Right. Are any sort of referrals going to matter? No. Is any of this surprising of what they want to do? No. Did you hear Mike Pence's comments on Fox News, how he doesn't think that we should indict people, that this time of year people are focused on their faith? If you don't indict a former president for obvious crimes, that does more harm to our country than any sort of indictment ever would. What message are we sending to the men and women who want to become president of this country? You could do whatever the hell you want then. It doesn't matter. You are above the rule of law, and that is so dangerous. And Mike Pence is such a wuss. And I mean, if he could have said in my book one more time during that interview, I was going to just throw up.
Yeah. Are you hearing that sound?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, guys, just trying to figure this out. Normally, Brooklyn Dad does this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm kind of doing it now instead. So we will figure this out in just a minute. Yeah, I think one of the things that I expect to see today will be just more angst. More of, like we don't know what to do moving forward here, and I totally get that. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, Nikki. I mean, part of me wants to see. I'd love to see the guy go into a prison, but then I just know that there's going to be people that we might be able to bring back towards sanity that won't come if he's in jail.
No,
I do believe that.
No.
Wait, hold on. So
they're gone.
I have two. No, they're not. I know 3 people in my neighborhood that voted for Trump.
Okay.
And they're all now like, yeah, I totally effed that up.
And you think that if we put Trump in jail, they'll go back to supporting Trump?
No, but I think it makes it. I think that Trump can put himself into his own prison by himself. I really do believe that. I think that he has that capability.
It's not enough.
Again, Mark Thompson, whose show kicks off in just a few minutes. Mark,
who are you saying is going to prison, Jim?
I would hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not going to go to prison.
No, he's not going to go to prison.
My belief is that there won't be a formal indictment. However, I do, at least not before 2024. I do think if there was going to be one, Georgia would be the first to do it. They have him literally on tape asking for somebody to subvert, an election. And that's a crime. It's literally exactly to the words what he did.
I just want to find 11,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
I'll tell you the thing, Chip, is sadly, Nikki, I think Chip's correct about this. You realize Washington, and we grew up there, Chip and myself. Not that is a bragging right, but it's just that you see it over and over. People get away with such stuff there because the institutions have to be protected, and sadly, they feel the institution of the presidency, which is not what it used to be, and maybe not what it ever was. I mean, in our minds, it has to be somehow protected. As a result, I think they're going to leave this guy. They may make criminal referrals today, but that doesn't mean the Justice Department will pick him up, right, Chip?
Yeah.
No. And
they don't have to.
This is symbolic, really.
Right.
This is. I mean, the truth is they've been working with Garland, and I'm sure Garland has, if not everything they have, has access to it. The headline right in front of us says the committee will hold a final public meeting. I think that, you look at people like Eric Swalwell and others who will tell you their story that day, worrying for their lives inside the House of Representatives.
Right.
His story still gives me goosebumps when he called his wife and she's bathing the kids and says, "Honey, turn on the TV. I think I'm going to be okay." As he told me that story that day, it blew my mind. I think we're getting closer. So tell me about
just the thought of having to bathe the kids just blows my mind. I hate that idea. I'm so glad I don't have children. All right, listen, Chip, I've got it. We're doing this. We're doing a bunch of other stuff. John Rothman is joining us from the old KGO, it's going to be quite the day. World Cup will touch on that, and it's Mark's Murder Mystery Monday. I don't need to tell you that. So another murder mystery, and it involves a major mobster. Yes.
Ah.
Oh. All right. We start in about 30 seconds, so I got to go over to the Mark Thompson Show. It's called, Chip. Thank
See
you.
you, brother. Check it on
Love
YouTube.
you, pal. Okay. See you guys. Bye, Nick.
Bye.
So Nikki, obviously the thing that I'm going to always remember about this, I think in this period we're in right now, is the people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who I disagree with, but had the balls to stand up to these mobs, and they are mobs, I mean, and that's a thing that, that when I think about this moving forward, that I'll never forget, how, I mean, just the emails people got. I mean, I'm nobody, and I get people taking pictures of my front door and sending it to me in an email saying, I know where you live. Right. I can only imagine what it's like for, Casey, was it Casey Hutchinson? Was that her name? The woman that
Oh yeah, Hutchinson.
Yeah. People that don't have, protection and live in, well, look at what happened to Nancy Pelosi,
Well, I mean, but that's why I say, Chip, it's important to show that if you incite people to take these steps, if you allow Trump to get off scot-free and be in a prison of his own making, that is not enough. It is not enough. You have to send a message to people, because there'll be someone that's more shrewd than Trump, and you have to send a message. If there are criminal charges, if you can prove it, then do it, because why would you not? Just to protect the institution, like Mark was saying.
If this House puts enough people in judiciary to put an impeachment vote for the floor, or if they bring Fauci in and let Rand Paul go at him again, I might change my mind. I might say, F you guys, we're going to hammer you hard. And we'll just have to see. All right, your show kicks off at noon.
Yeah.
Always
we'll
great to
touch
see
on
you.
this, obviously, and we'll talk Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a big day.
All right. See you, boss.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Chip.
Again, Nikki Maduro, her show again kicks in on YouTube. You can check her out again, Nikki Nikki Maduro. So we're waiting obviously for the committee to come in. You can see the crowd is seated and everyone's ready. It's a good, actually an angle there. You can see the teleprompters that they read from, huge teleprompters that are, a part of this hearing. Occasionally people, and you can tell this, they pull a little Donald Trump and they go off the teleprompters, which is, haven't been somebody that's taught people how to use teleprompters before. It's remarkable. There are some people that are just naturally good at it. And Liz Cheney is one of them. I mean, everything that's come together, again, for a person who I am diametrically opposed to politically, that's happened here is exciting. That this is something that she did well. And I think she gave Democrats a foot to stand on when everybody called for, this to be shut down, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Sean Hannity saying this was a political witch hunt. You'd say, no, the person who received the highest in the U.S. Senate, in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, the Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney had the highest conservative rating. They had voted with Trump, her especially, as you heard earlier, 94% of the time. This was not and has never been a crazy liberal. Again, this was a person who stood side by side the president, for that in period, the Trump for all 4 years until he tried to subvert the very nature of our government. So anyway, great comments here. Let me see if I can throw a couple more in before we actually go to this. Here's one for you. There's no message we can send that Trump reporters will hear. I'm not sure. Thanks again. It was Cassidy Hutchinson. Thank you. Yeah, I like Lori's stuff. Can't wait to hear John Rothman, even though I heard his Hanukkah telling many times. Yeah, I miss John Rothman. For those that don't know, I used to be on KGO radio, and that was in San Francisco, and they just imploded the whole son of a bitch. And so now here we are with you. And I actually love this better, to be honest with you. I don't have any bosses other than you. You're my bosses. Another one, Eric says, protecting the institution means holding him accountable. And that's an interesting point. But again, accountability, we can hold him accountable by taking every dime he's ever had. And that can work as well. All right, let me see here. We're getting closer and closer. Let me see if we can get a little bit of sound in here, see what's going on here. Okay. Okay, CNN is still doing a voiceover here. I will take you to this momentarily. We will keep this on throughout, so we hope you watch it right here. Again, I want to remind you that this is What the Franklin. I'm Chip Franklin. I'm putting this under the Really American Media Network, of which I do a lot of work with. Good people. Their super PAC has done a lot of good. I'll give you an example of what Really America did. And they're the people that got paid. They got hundreds of thousands of dollars from money, and they gave it to Uber drivers to take people to the polls in Georgia. A significant. It was very significant. These Capitol Hill hearings are so different than they were in the Watergate days, where the grainy black and white, and people were smoking cigarettes in the back room. But today there's a sense of history here that is different than what happened in 1974, and to watch, or 73, and to watch Sam Ervin and others conduct, again, Republicans. Back then there were dozens of Liz Cheneys. Today there are not even a dozen. If the fact that I can name the Republicans that have come forward, and many times we leave Mitt Romney out of that. Mitt Romney was the only Republican senator that voted to remove Trump from office and the impeachment, one of the two impeachment. So, again, this is interesting, to go look at this. I mentioned that I think that Mike Pence might be running, and John writes, Pence is culpable too. He continues to embolden Trump and not call him out or bother to employ, I think, the 25th Amendment. And you look down here and you ask yourself, I just ask you again. I know I assume if you're watching this, you probably want to see him in prison, but is that really where we want this to go? What will that mean with him in prison as a martyr? Because I guarantee you his base will not go away when he goes to prison. But if he's allowed to be free and we can watch his grift and watch him revert back to the old Donald Trump, because we know this is a show. Remember the old Donald Trump was pro-choice. He was a pig. And when he is allowed to revert to that, in many ways, that's a better outcome than putting him in prison. It doesn't feel as good, but right, it is interesting. Interesting point there. All right. I think we're about to kick this thing off. I believe they're beginning to come in. I'm going to cut away to the CNN coverage right now. We will be keeping an eye on this all day long and get back to you on the back end of this. Again, I'm Chip Franklin. This is What the Franklin, with live coverage of the January 6th committee as they hold their final public meeting.
To serve on this committee, to try to hold Donald Trump and his minions responsible in no small way. We're going to hear from them in a second.
I just, to underscore, both Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, they are the two Republicans who joined the committee. There are also Republican staff members. They both are leaving Congress.
Yeah, well, she's leaving Congress not willingly. We should note she lost her primary to a Trump-endorsed candidate who was being supported by a lot of the same people who have testified to the committee about Donald Trump's lies. Were still, even though they were telling the truth behind the scenes in some cases, and appalled by what Donald Trump was doing, fully part of the effort to get rid of Liz Cheney. Let's listen in.
A quorum being present, the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release deposition material presented during today's meeting, and further, its approval to release deposition material that accompanies release of the Select Committee's final report. Good afternoon, and may God bless the United States of America. To cast a vote in the United States is an act of faith and hope. When we drop that ballot in the ballot box, we expect the people named on the ballot are going to uphold their end of the deal. The winner swears an oath and upholds it. Those who come up short ultimately accept the results and abide by the rule of law. That faith in our system is the foundation of American democracy. If the faith is broken, so is our democracy. Donald Trump broke that faith. He lost the 2020 election and knew it. But he chose to try to stay in office through a multi-part scheme to overturn the results and block the transfer of power. In the end, he summoned a mob to Washington, and knowingly they were armed and angry, pointed them to the Capitol and told them to fight like hell. There's no doubt about this. This afternoon, my colleagues will present our key findings, reminding you of some of the information we presented in earlier hearings and telling you how it fits in our broader conclusions. Those conclusions have helped shape the committee's final report, which we'll adopt today pursuant to House Resolution 503, which establishes the Select Committee nearly a year and a half ago. I expect our final work will be filed with the Clerk of the House and made public later this week. Beyond that release, the Select Committee intends to make public the bulk of its non-sensitive records before the end of the year. These transcripts and documents will allow the American people to see for themselves the body of evidence we've gathered and continue to explore the information that has led us to our conclusions. This committee is nearing the end of its work. But as the country, we remain in strange and uncharted waters. We've never had a president of the United States stir up a violent attempt to block the transfer of power. I believe nearly 2 years later, this is still a time of reflection and reckoning. If we are to survive as a nation of laws and democracy, this can never happen again. How do we stop it? This committee will lay out a number of recommendations in this final report. But beyond any specific details and recommendations we present, there's one factor I believe is most important in preventing another January 6th: accountability. So today, beyond our findings, we will also show
Please leave your message for
gathered points to further action beyond the power of this committee or the Congress to help ensure accountability under law. Accountability that can only be found in the criminal justice system. We have every confidence that the work of this committee will help provide a roadmap to justice, and that the agencies and institutions responsible for ensuring justice under the law will use the information we provided to aid in their work. And for those of you who have followed this committee's work, I hope we've helped make clear that there's a broader kind of accountability. Accountability to all of you.
I kept telling people that I was going to be doing my shows under the Really American Media.
To decide who deserves the public trust, who will put fidelity to the Constitution and democracy above all else, who will abide by the rule of law, no matter the outcome. I'm grateful to the millions of you who followed this committee's work. I hope we lived up to our commitment to present the facts and let the facts speak for themselves. Let me say in closing, the women and men seated around me on this dais are public servants in the most genuine sense. They've put aside politics and partisanship to ensure the success of this committee in providing answers to the American people. I especially want to thank and acknowledge our Vice Chair, who has become a true partner in this bipartisan effort, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming. And I also recognize her for any opening statement that she cared to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your tremendous leadership of this committee. I know we all have benefited greatly from your wisdom and your wise counsel, so thank you very much. In April of 1861, when Abraham Lincoln issued the first call for volunteers for the Union Army. My great-great-grandfather, Samuel Fletcher Cheney, joined the 21st Ohio Volunteer Infantry. He fought through all 4 years of the Civil War, from Chickamauga to Stones River to Atlanta. He marched with his unit in the Grand Review of Troops up Pennsylvania Avenue in May of 1865, past a reviewing stand where President Johnson and General Grant were seated. Silas Canfield, the regimental historian of the 21st Ohio Volunteer Infantry, described the men in the unit this way. He said they had a just appreciation of the value and advantage of free government and the necessity of defending and maintaining it. And they enlisted, prepared to accept all the necessary labors, fatigues, exposures, dangers, and even death for the unity of our nation and the perpetuity of our institutions. I have found myself thinking often, especially since January 6th, of my great-great-grandfather and all those in every generation who have sacrificed so much for the unity of our nation and the perpetuity of our institutions. At the heart of our republic is the guarantee of the peaceful transfer of power. Members of Congress are reminded of this every day as we pass through the Capitol Rotunda. There, 8 magnificent paintings detail the earliest days of our republic. One, painted by John Trumbull, depicts the moment in 1793 when George Washington resigned his commission, handing control of the Continental Army back to Congress. Trumbull called this, quote, one of the highest moral lessons ever given the world. With this noble act, George Washington established the indispensable example of the peaceful transfer of power in our nation. Standing on the west front of the Capitol in 1981, President Ronald Reagan described it this way: orderly transfer of authority as called for in the Constitution routinely takes place, as it has for almost 2 centuries, and few of us stop to think how unique we really are. In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony that we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. Every president in our history has defended this orderly transfer of authority, except one. January 6, 2021 was the first time one American president refused his constitutional duty to transfer power peacefully to the next. In our work over the last 18 months, Select Committee has recognized our obligation to do everything we can to ensure this never happens again. At the beginning of our investigation, we understood that tens of millions of Americans had been persuaded by President Trump that the 2020 election was stolen by overwhelming fraud. And we also knew this was flatly false. We knew that dozens of state and federal judges had addressed and resolved all manner of allegations about the election. Our legal system functioned as it should, but our president would not accept the outcome. Among the most shameful of this committee's findings was that President Trump sat in the dining room off the Oval Office watching the violent riot at the Capitol on television. For hours, he would not issue
Ever since our
public
conversation,
statements
I'm
instructing
really
his
excited
supporters to
about
disperse
working
and
with
leave
you
the Capitol,
on this
despite
media
urgent
company,
pleas from
period.
his White House staff and dozens of others to do so. Members of his family, his White House lawyers,
I
virtually
really want to
all
make it
those around
successful,
him
period.
knew that this simple act was critical. For hours, he would not do it. During this time, law enforcement agents were attacked and seriously injured. The Capitol was invaded, the electoral count was halted.
I'll make sure
and the
we don't
lives of
double
those
post
in the
ever
Capitol
again,
were at
period.
risk. In addition to being unlawful, as described in our report, this was an utter moral failure and a clear dereliction of duty. Evidence of this can be seen in the testimony of President Trump's own White House counsel and several other White House witnesses. No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office. The committee recognizes that our work has only begun. It's only the initial step in addressing President Trump's effort to remain in office illegally. Prosecutors are considering the implications of the conduct that we describe in our report, as are citizens all across our nation. In 1761, John Adams wrote, "The very ground of our liberty."
ReallyAmericanMedia.com is available,
Faith in
period.
our elections and the rule of law is paramount to our republic. Election deniers, those who refuse to accept lawful election results, purposely attack the rule of law and the foundation of our country. The history
We should
of our
grab it,
time
period.
will show that the bravery of a handful of Americans doing their duty saved us from an even more grave constitutional crisis. Elected officials, election workers, and public servants stood against Donald Trump's corrupt pressure. Many of our committee's witnesses showed selfless patriotism, and their words and courage will be remembered. The brave men and women of the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police, and all the other law enforcement officers who fought to defend us that day saved lives and our democracy. Finally, I wish to thank my colleagues on this committee. It has been a tremendous honor to serve with all of you. We have accomplished great and important things together, and I hope we have set an example. And I also want to thank all of those who have honorably contributed to the work of our committee and to our report. We have accomplished much over a short period of time. Many of you sacrificed for the good of our nation. You have helped make history, and I hope helped to right the ship. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Young lady yields back. As you know, this is our final meeting of our committee. Over the course of the last year and a half, we presented evidence in 10 public hearings, testimony from our brave law enforcement officers, senior White House, and campaign officials, and many others. Today, we are prepared to share our final.
Hey, buddy. I totally. Well, C-SPAN. When I went to do it, it told me I had to put my provider in there, and my provider's YouTube TV, and it didn't have it wouldn't let me do that. So I'm using CNN. What will CNN cut me off at some point, or does it buffer weird or something, or?
I don't know. Why would you use CNN?
Because I couldn't get C-SPAN to work without putting. Yeah, that was the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I have not.
My gut is that CNN at some point is going to tell me I have to log in, which will suck. I'm going to try to see if I can get C-SPAN running in the back. If I can, or actually, I'm going to see if I can get YouTube TV running in the back, because I can always use that.
Has the hearing not already started?
It only started 20 minutes ago, or about 10 minutes ago.
Shit, no kidding.
Yeah. So what Brian and I did was we came on and we did 9 to 10, and I had a lawyer on. It was a good hour. It worked really well. And then it kicked in, and so far so good. But if I recall correctly, at some point they tell me I have to sign up for something. So I'm gonna in the background see if I can find and get YouTube TV running as well somewhere. So just in case it does that to me.
Oh, so you didn't do a test yesterday, did you?
I tried. What I did was I was playing video, but I couldn't play anything live because C-SPAN had nothing live on yesterday, right? So that was the hard part. And then I saw today, it told me I have to tell them what provider I use, and I don't have a provider. I use YouTube TV.
Oh, dude, your mic is on. You have to mute yourself. Somebody just messaged me.
a murder-suicide pact. Remember using the term murder-suicide pact? Yes. Was it your impression that the vice president had directly conveyed his position on these issues to the president, not just to the world?
All right. Sorry about this, folks. I have had some difficulties here with the sound, as you can tell, with my feed, and I will continue to work on it. And we will be here at the break to try to figure this all out. So thanks again.